Holy happy hour, Batman! I'm Father Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest. I'm a longtime gamer, TTRPG enthusiast, streamer, podcast host, and I'm a co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. On this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I'm joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, whatever else comes up week to week. And this week, we have another amazing guest and what is sure to be a really amazing episode. I'm very excited about this. I have Daisy Ellis on the show, who is an independent content creator for tabletop role-playing games. And I would refer to as one of a few very notable influencers in the TTRPG scene. So this is from their bio. Daisy is the Twitch producer for WebDM Show, or at least was, so we'll have to catch up on that, make sure that's still true. Has written for 2C Gaming, Monte Cook Games, Saturday Morning Scenarios, and more. Has been featured on the official D&D Twitch channel and YouTube channel. I saw that earlier today. Roll20 Presents, and lots of Twitch channels. Has worked the convention circuit for Kobold Press. And so this is going to be a really exciting conversation. And we're going to bring Daisy on in just a couple of minutes, begin picking her brain. It's going to be awesome. So a few housekeeping things before we get started, though. We're here on our relatively new Monday night time slot. The show is at 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we raid right into our next APON show, Branching Paths, with Kimber and Josh immediately following at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the All Ports Open Twitch channel. Next week, we have another awesome guest, so make sure you mark the calendar. I'm going to be joined by the game designer Ethan Hudgens, who's the creator of the recently successfully kickstarted Garden of the Giants. I'm excited about that conversation, that game, and I'm excited about that game. I think it's going to be really fun. That's next Monday, same time slot, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at That Gamer Priest. Coming up in September, we're going to be having a very special suicide prevention awareness episode. So keep an eye out for that and all the other upcoming episode announcements as they come out. Okay, so it is happy hour. And so, as always, I like to come bringing a cocktail inspired by my guest for the week. So I was thinking a lot about... sorry, I just seen the chat and I saw somebody say that Ethan is the best and that Daisy's okay too. Well, we'll catch up on that once Daisy's on the show in a second. But anyway, so we got a drink recipe card today that I made, and I was thinking about, okay, what drink to what would be a good drink inspired by my guest today. And so I was thinking about this idea of like kind of doing like some of everything, which like I think is true of Daisy. So like I was like, okay, this is a person who does a lot of everything. So what kind of drink would be inspired by that? So I created this drink called the Renaissance GM, and it is a blue cocktail, which I thought was interesting because of the Wise Papa Grant Twitter handle, which made me think of a Papa Smurf. So anyway, it's a blue drink. You can see what's in it. It's a half ounce tequila Blanco, half ounce tequila Reposada, half ounce of aged rum, half ounce of gin, half ounce of triple sec, half ounce of blue curacao. See, there's a little bit of everything in it. And then a teaspoon of lemon juice, a splash of Sprite at the end. You kind of mix it all up. It was really good. So, and then we got a lot of chat going on. We're gonna have to catch up on that chat in a second. This is really fun. So thanks everyone for joining me. If you make the drink, I'll post this cocktail recipe card afterward on social and on the video link and all that stuff afterward when this is a video on demand in the show notes. If anyone makes it, make sure you let me know, because that's my rule. If you make my drink, you gotta let me know if you liked it. You gotta let me know if you tried it. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and bring Daisy on the show here. So welcome to Holy Happy Hour, Batman.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And Batman certainly is great. Can't argue.
You're covering Batman up right now. They're
good.
On the screen. I just
he needs it.
He's hiding behind you there. And by the way, for the people, I do have my blue drink. I didn't show it. I got it right here. It's actually, this one came out a little more green, but anyway, is Wise Papa Grant a Papa Smurf reference?
Yes. So, in the 90s on Cartoon Network, they used to do parody cartoon commercials, and one of them was parking at the Cartoon Network parking lot. And so I want to say Fred Flintstone was carpooling with Thundar the Barbarian and one other character. And Papa Smurf has his own reserved parking spot. So Thundar goes, "Wise Papa Smurf, corrupted by his own power. Does no leader go untainted?" So years ago when I made my Twitter handle, I just, "Wise Papa Grant."
Mm-hmm. Nice. I love it. Love it. Well, so it was sort of a coincidence. Actually, my wife first suggested, like, oh, you can make a blue drink and it could be a Papa Smurf reference. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if that's the way to go. And then I coincidentally did make the drink blue because I wanted blue curacao in it. And I was like, well, it was fated, I suppose.
Yeah, I typically only use orange curacao, but it's great to see a blue one.
You know what? I think I've had this bottle of blue curacao. I've been like, because now I invent a new cocktail every week for the show. I've been using it more, and that's because I have it. Because otherwise, I've had the same bottle, and I think this is true for a lot of people. Same bottle of blue curacao sitting down there, not being drank for years and years and years.
That's similar to my. I think I have a 151 proof Don Julio that saw a lot of use when I started making zombies, but I accidentally made a rum and coke, and all the rums were similar colors at that point. I poured this one. I saw the heavens opened, and I was just, I went to a different place that night. Most people thought I had ended up in jail. I didn't. I was watching LA Confidential at the time, and my mind and the movie melded into one.
Oh,
so
you gotta love when that happens. Okay, so Daisy, this is the thing. You gotta number your rum bottles. That's what I have learned. You gotta number your rum bottles, and then you just refer to the number, and then you know which rum it is, so you don't make that mistake.
That's the dark arts right there. That's next level galaxy brain.
It is. It is. Well, I've made my fair share of zombies in my day. Anybody who makes zombies, though, I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Issa, who's a cosplayer and a streamer from the UK, she was the one that recommended I start making them, and then she recommended a number of drinks, and then sorry, Mur in chat.
I know.
Yeah, Mur and I will spend a weekend together in DC, and we will somehow end up in a Turkish prison. Yes. We've hung out a few times, and we're like the same person, just palette swapped.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but Issa recommended drinks. I was like, these are some interesting drinks. They seem very boozy. She goes, oh, yeah, I just want the one that gets you really drunk. So I went in on the zombies.
Yes, awesome.
A couple others.
It's just a really good drink. I was drinking them the night the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I'm from Philly, and I definitely ended up on the floor celebrating and outside screaming and all that stuff. And I have strong connections now between that night and drinking zombies.
Yeah, Philly is actually my favorite food town in the world.
Really?
Anytime I go there for PAX Unplugged, me and my friends. I think we spend more time eating at good restaurants than at the convention. I'll link them sometimes, but there's a vast collection of photos on my Twitter from all my mini meals, from 7-course Moroccan meals to just really good breakfast. Gosh, it's a great food city.
Absolutely. Well, Philly's my favorite everything city, but I'm biased, so I've got a lot of strong feelings. It's a great city to host something like PAX Unplugged, though.
100%. Yeah, it's one of my favorite to visit. I'd say it's, if not the favorite, I'd have to be stretched to pick another city more just because I have so many good memories there.
Yeah. So, do you think there'll be a PAX Unplugged? This is just like we're veering way off right from the get-go here in the conversation, which I love.
It's totally okay. I think there will be. I think there will be. I don't know how attendance is going to look like. If it's held there, though, I'll be there signing copies of my book. So
cool. Well, we will have to connect there in person then if we're there. I have to imagine, unless something strange is going on in my life, which I'm just thinking ahead, like, is there that I will be there, because every year I've been there. Every year we've had it, of course. I've been there all 3 days, and I was in a panel for 2 of those 3 years. So I was thinking, I just need to think ahead as to like what I'm doing with cons. But if it's going on, I'll be there. I've heard some chatter about the idea of having not to get lost in this rabbit hole, but having like requirements around vaccinations and stuff to attend. So I guess we'll see how all that stuff pans out. But hey, so what I usually do at the beginning of the show is say hello, welcome, and say tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay,
we skipped over that part. We
That's
just
good.
jumped right into the deep end.
That's good. It shows that we're comfortable and we trust each other. So my name is Daisy Darling Ellis. Most people know me by the name Grant Ellis, which is the name I'm published under mostly in the RPG space. I am still the producer for WebDM Plays. Cool. Guested on their show a few times. I've been published in about 20 books. I'm largely known for my many appearances on Twitch in a variety of places. I've been involved in over 1,000 broadcasts on over 30 channels. So it's I've been streaming since about 2012, mostly focused on RPGs since 2015.
Cool. What were you focused on before that?
Mostly SNES games. I played a lot of Japanese imports. Every now and then I would do game design streams. In fact, even before I was doing what I do is I'd come up with a game concept. We would do a design session. I'd show everyone how I designed the game, and then we do a play test with random people, just pulled from Discords, pulled from Twitter, pulled from Facebook groups. I didn't know most of the people. It's just, I'm running a game. It's going to be streamed. I'd like you to play. Here's kind of the pitch. And then we'd get a group together. And then after that, we'd get data about how the game ran. And then I'd do a revision. Then I'd run another play test. And that would be my 4 streams over the week. And that's how most people started to find me.
Oh, that's cool. That's really interesting. Well, so I didn't do this intentionally, but I just had Sean Reynolds on the show like 2 weeks ago, and then I didn't realize you had that Monte Cook Games connection. You had worked.
I do.
Monte Cook. Yeah, I didn't know that. I was doing research for this interview.
Yeah. In fact, I'm good friends with most all the folks at Monte Cook Games. Bruce Cordell's someone I look up to. Sean is one of the kindest people. I'll just sit. I'll get off the mic, Mer. Apparently, I'm very loud.
Oh, but I can fix that.
So Sean guested on my podcast recently. I do these 10-minute tabletop podcasts where I just people and we talk about it. But yeah, we've hung in person a few times. He's got a couple photos of me lugging my copy of Invisible Sun. They're just really good folks. And then they've hired me a couple times. The piece that I'm most proud of is actually a book of essays written by different artists and designers. And I gave a deep artistic analysis of one of their games. A lot of my schooling's in being an art critic, but specifically around sensory experiences. And so they brought me in to do an essay and give sort of my philosophical stance, as well as a critique of one of their games at a very high level. So it's one of the pieces that I'm most proud of.
That's really cool. Is the essay in the Your Best Game Ever book? Is that what that's in?
It's actually in a book called The Essence of Invisible Sun, where their design team and then a group of artists they brought in that had connection to the game were brought in, and we each wrote essays. And it's a neat collection of thoughts and ideas.
Cool.
Good folks worked on it. And yeah, their games are also really fun to play. Very, very high quality. Yeah,
definitely. I love Cypher System. I love Monte Cook games. I love. I told Sean 2 weeks ago, like, I always back Monte Cook game Kickstarters because they're so good. And then I was like, they were pretty far into this campaign, and then I was like, wait a second, I have a show. Like, why am I not getting them to come on my show to talk about this game? The devil is in the name. Like, it's, in the name. Like, how am I not? So I did. So luckily I was able to work it out with them schedule wise, and get him on the show. But I love their games, and I just started playing Invisible Sun, actually, and what an amazingly fun game. It's so immersive and awesome.
Very unique, and that's what as it was coming out, so I got it, and no one really knew what it was going to be exactly.
Yeah.
And there was a hypothesis that my friends at Cypher Unlimited put out that it could not be run online. So I launched 5 simultaneous online streamed shared universe Invisible Sun campaigns. I hadn't really met them, but they were just like, wow, it worked. And like, it was very ambitious, and it was so much work, but it was also so much fun. It really, it's one of those really ambitious projects. And I will say this about the folks at MCG. Monty and I were at Gen Con, and he was explaining how they often have to do sort of like a mental reset because they might spend an entire day designing for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. Then the next day, the same setting, but in Cypher system. And so the design philosophy is going to switch. And then the next day they have to work on a stretch goal for Invisible Sun, which is completely different. And then it's interesting the amount of gymnastics they do and the way they stretch themselves. It's also really fun, like for Sean or Bruce or Monty, to go back to their older work and just see when they were nascent game designers, all brilliant designers still, but and how the culture was different. You know, Sean was involved very much in the early like RPGA scenes, doing internet tracking of gaming events. And then Bruce, in the first book he writes on, he's justifying his math for the modification of dwarven hit points in his module because they're different. And then he breaks down, this is the math I use, kind of shaking his finger at the reader. He goes, you might want to challenge me. And it's interesting just to sort of see where they started.
Yeah, especially considering where they are now. That's pretty. Well, do you feel like it's a similar mental gymnastic thing when it comes to doing lots of streams of lots of different games, in that GM or at least GMing, even maybe like, you know, switching that role between games as a GM?
I think it's unique around the finer points. So for me, and I run lots of games. We'll do plugs at the end, but there's a Japanese RPG that's being translated into English. The crowdfunding launches tomorrow. I ran the first pass of the translation, so the localization's still in process. It's a game system that's unlike most games that a North American audience has played. It's a PvP RPG where all the players are kind of competing against each other.
Oh, that sounds fun.
And sort of back to the original question, I think for me, what I do is I take the game, an example might be Fading Suns. I just got a stack of games. Or the same week, we might play in, here we go, The Dark Eye. So in all these games, very different designers, very different goal of the game, different rule sets. Yeah. And I always just take it, and then I sit, and then when I start my prep, I go back to first principles. And normally with the first principles is going to be who's sitting at the table. A game like The Dark Eye has over 1,000 rules, but you only need 4 to really play the game. So I'm like, we have a new player. We have someone who's played for 3 months. The person who has played for 3 months really doesn't enjoy combat in their campaigns. However, I think we need to introduce one and use the simplest form of combat, just so the new player who can experience it because they want to. Likewise with Fading Suns, it's a whole new vocabulary because they might be inventing new terms in the game. Then we come to this Japanese RPG where it's like, this will only ever be played as one-shots. There is no character growth. Understand that most everyone's character is going to have a horrible ending after the game. But it's meant to be, it's great for like a convention environment.
Yeah.
So you can just run with it. And so sort of back to the question is, I think where I do less mental gymnastics is I always start with these first principles. Who's at the table and what game are we playing? And then lean into that. It's something that I've learned. It's almost like if you speak a bunch of different languages, it's easy to get tripped up, but you might just remind yourself, this is the way we speak here. So, or this is the language of the day.
No, that's
also understand. Yeah. I say one other add-on is
sorry.
The culture of where the game was developed also matters.
Yeah.
In understanding where the game came out of. The Japanese game, Picaresque Roman, comes out of Yakuza flavored manga. The Fading Suns is patterned after stage plays. Not only that, it's actually patterned after passion plays, religious plays. And they want you to lean into that. And then the Dark Eye is, if you allowed an RPG to grow for 45 years in a vacuum in Germany, what would it look like? And that's literally what it is. It's great. It's
wow.
But you also have to understand that decisions were made over 40 years in the context of the culture, so it's framed a certain way.
So I was thinking language is such a good way to think about it. Like the idea of speaking different languages and having to switch them back and forth is because it's not just words that translate into other words, right? Like it's so much deeper than that. It's culture and meaning and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about, like what's the context that these games came out of. And that's part of your language when you are trying to run as the GM. And
then it circles back to, again, the first principle: who's at the table with me. Like Mur's in the chat. Mur and I have played games where it looks like a boxing match to outsiders. They don't even think we're friends, but we are. We're best pals, and we're just playing, and we're going for intense emotional palette, and we have each other's backs. We're going to support each other, but we're going to put on, we're going to be playing. We're not going to be playing slow pitch. It's going to be fast pitch. And so,
sure.
We might not pull every punch. Sometimes we're going to let them land a little clean. But it's great. However, not everyone, not every group, it's suitable to play with that intensity. So you kind of have to figure out where to dial. We talked about how I did the convention scene with Kobold Press. That's where I really learned to cut my teeth. I was running for hundreds of people at conventions around the country. And as people would come in, I'd really have to just sort of do an assessment of the group. Some people might need play aids like miniatures or handouts or drawn maps. Other people might need me to give time for the math. They're struggling with math, so let's just let everyone know there's no rush. We have all the time in the world to, do this. Some people want to be extreme sticklers for the rules, even if it's to punish the other people at the table. Sorry. Or I should say certain people at the table, where they're picking and choosing. They're letting some people slide, and then they maybe keep picking on someone. And you have to understand how to call that out when you're facilitating a game to make sure everyone feels comfortable and make sure it's fair and consistent.
That's a lot of mental gymnastics. Speaking of the mental gymnastics we talked about, there's a different kind, but that's a lot. It is a lot of mental sort of. I'd say it comes down to emotional IQ as well, where it's like being able to read people and have empathy. Also allowing yourself to be vulnerable and maybe ask questions when you don't necessarily understand. Like, there's all different kinds of games. Yeah. But it helps to I've only run at cons a little bit. I ran some oh my gosh, from Monty Cook Games also some I'm totally spacing the kids RPG.
Oh yeah, No Thank You Evil.
No Thank You Evil. I can't believe I spaced on the name of that game.
You got it. They do so many games. We'll forgive you that one.
But that's like special in my household because of my kids' ages. It's a special game here at my house. Anyway, I ran it a little bit, and it was so fun to me. One of the keys for that was like being excited about it, right? Like I was excited to show people something that I thought was super cool, and that could potentially, give their family and their kids something really new and fun, and maybe create some new enthusiasts in the hobby in children that grow up playing. And so being excited about, what it was is definitely helped me with like being able to handle a lot of that stuff you were just describing with like running for people I'd never met before. And like the pressures of that was just like being excited about the thing that I was helping people to experience.
Yeah, for me as well. When I started doing conventions, RPGs hadn't really quite made their comeback yet. In fact, it kind of looked like they were waning. It was getting to the point where we could get space at war game events up and down the East Coast.
Yeah.
Um, and the players we could get were like maybe a parent and two children, and that's it. And like the
Yeah.
kids are like 9 and 6, and they've never played before, but the parents extremely excited, and it's like, all right, let's run an RPG. In that context, I think learning to run for families, especially families of various ages, and there's a couple of good things about it. One, you get the feeling that you understand the parent. This is there's like a lineage here. They are it's generational. They are passing a game they love, even if it's a new addition, to a future generation. The second is their family, and there are strong bonds between the players at the table. And the third is this is going to be a teaching experience where someone is going to be learning the game for the first time, but you can kind of see it's all rooted in, this is becoming a family tradition. This is something I love. I want my kids to get this and to have a good experience.
Yeah. So I just want to interrupt our awesome conversation real fast because I forgot to warn people at the beginning of the show. I did tell Daisy this. My dog is in rare form. So if my dog starts interrupting me while I'm talking, I apologize to everybody, especially to you, Daisy, because you're my guest.
No worries.
Right? To everybody.
Dogs are welcome.
It could happen. So I'm just telling people, I want to make sure people know it could happen. But you were talking about this. I imagine it must be pretty. I've been playing role playing games for a long time. Also, I've been playing since not since like a while, but not in. I guess it's all relative, right? So since maybe right at the advent of third edition D&D is when I started playing. So I have not been playing since.
That's a very long time still.
It is, but I haven't playing. And so it is a long time, but not comparatively, right? Like, so
not comparatively.
So like, what's amazing to me though, is that how different it is in the scene now from when I started playing. And that's only in my time that I've been playing. So I imagine, I'm like, just curious how you feel about that shocking change that has taken place with the hobby.
It's very interesting. I started in 1989, and I really started getting into it in 1993. And my groups growing up, I had to run my first session. This might give some hints as when we talk about the change. Yeah. I was 11, and I had to run for a group of 17-year-olds. And I had never played the game before. I'm 11, as my older brother and his friends are all high school seniors. And we did pretty well until we got to the mechanics. So 5 minutes in, then he yelled at me. I had to run home crying. I will say this. The way it is now is great because of sort of a global exposure. Like even you and I now having a conversation, like in 2000, maybe we see each other on an internet forum or a online bulletin board or a chat room. But now we can see each other and we can hear each other's voices and we can broadcast the conversation to others. And we can kind of have this exposure of ideas at a global level, which is, it's really kind of cool. And also watching sort of like the meta shift in the design space, in the play space. I think directionally, it's headed to a really good place as a total. I know it's tough sometimes, but RPGs and games are so big. They're bigger than Twitch. They're bigger than YouTube. They're bigger than the convention scene. There's so many different communities and market segments. I was a convention director for our local convention, which was originally an esports convention, but we still get like 3,000 people coming, and it's just really cool to watch how it spreads and changes and evolves.
Sorry, I was my
It's
mic
okay.
my mic was muted because I was trying to get my dog to stop growling over there.
I thought I heard my kids yelling, so
I think
they were
I did
growling as
too
well.
for a split second.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we got it coming at us from all directions. Well, yeah. Well, that's interesting that you say that the scene is bigger than it's bigger than Twitch. It's bigger than Twitter community. It's bigger than because sometimes it can feel like sometimes I think it can feel like uh, Twitch is the actual size of the community, or Twitter is the actual size of the community, and it's easy to forget that like it is so much bigger than that, or the con scene that you're in is the size of the
It's
community.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to is there's many communities, and it's good to journey and find a place in all of them. And naturally, folks can curate their experience; they can choose where to go. Like for years, that convention scene, seeing all my pals, seeing all
Yeah.
my people that work in the industry. I mean, shoot, I even started designing professionally. My buddies, James Introcaso, Dan Dillon, Sean Merwin, Joey Hake, James Hake, and Jim McClure. We were just having dinner at Origins Game Fair. It was like 2 a.m. and we're just talking. It's dinner. It's very late, but and they all just turned to me and they're like, "So when are you going to design something? We know you. We know the like." And I studied design and stuff. They're like, "We know you know your we when," and so they pushed me to do it. And yeah, it's just big.
So what did that push turn into? What was the first design project that you did?
The first design project that I did in recent years was I was brought on to do a monster group for the 2C Gaming's Total Party Kill Bestiary. And I designed a monster group for that. And then they really liked working with me. They said, "Well, could you do an encounter for our TPK handbook?" I did that, and they said, how do you feel about doing your own setting? You've got chops. You've done all these campaigns online.
Yeah.
And so I hit the ground rolling, but my heart is in doing my own kind of design, my own kind of play experiences. So I wrote a game that was my love letter to gaming called Unrestful Hearts in the Garden of Glory, which is all about playing knights in a time of civil strife. And while we were designing the game and playtesting it, we were on a stream, and we were one of the most watched TTRPG on Saturday nights in the 7 p.m. Eastern time slot. And we had a good audience size, and I've never published the game. I'm on like my third official version of the rules with like 30 iterations. I'd really like to go back and explore it, but it just took those folks turning their heads and being like, "So when are you going to?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Nah, it's hard, and then everyone's gonna rip up your work, and
Yeah.
they'll eat me alive." And then it was a good experience,
probably.
though.
All true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff is all true, and yet still can be a satisfying and worthwhile experience to do it. I have to ask though, what are the factors that have kind of kept you from ending up publishing the game?
I think the timing paradigm is one, and I think sometimes we're very quick to rush to market because we have a fear of maybe we won't be relevant, maybe we just want to get it over with. Maybe we feel a need to monetize on it. And I think for me with this one, it's like Einstein's theory of everything. It's like, it's not ready. And he died before he never finished it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that'll necessarily happen with me, but I was like, this one, maybe it needs another year in the incubator because it feels good. It's a full game. It works. But it's just kind of missing the magic that it needs. And I think there's nothing wrong with an overly long development cycle. But with that said, it's very easy for Neil Gaiman gave the advice. His advice to artists are start things, and then if someone comes back and say I have, he goes finish things.
Yeah.
So those are his two pieces of advice. So it's like at some point I just have to finish it.
It's true. Well, we were actually talking about this exact thing last week because I had Hannah Schaefer and Evan Rollin were on the show, and they're talking about Questlandia 2 and how that podcast, their podcast design doc about developing that game has been around now. It's been since 2017, so now it's been hanging out there for a while. And we talked about that, how like, well, sometimes it can feel like, okay, maybe we're dragging this process out too long. People's like ability to wait for it, an interest level and being on board with it might wane. We feel, or like you said, maybe you feel sometimes like there's a need to monetize it. But in their case, at least, it was like the interruptions kept being other creative endeavors. So like, and starting and ending creative endeavors in the meantime. So not just starting them, which is one downfall, I guess, right? It's just starting a bunch of stuff and never finishing it.
Are you a fan of music?
Oh yeah.
Everyone's a fan of music. Someone who I really admire as a songwriter and a producer is Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Smile album took a very long time to get out of him. That's one of the most beautiful albums ever created. And so a lot of work in between and a lot of life experience in between. And it was similar with Pet Sounds as well. So like, my advice to artists too is make pet sounds, do your own thing and do it at your pace, and be bold and adventurous. And it's similar when I wrote Grimworld, I think I finished 9 other projects during Grimworld's development cycle. And it's just sometimes it just needs to bake a little while longer, or we don't have the creative energy worthy of the project available. With that said, I don't know how much I buy into that. Like I tell everyone, they said, how did you write your book? I said I sat down every day and I wrote it. Eventually it got done, and then it took longer than expected, but it doesn't write itself, so it took doing it.
I think you're right. I think that, so I'm designing a couple games, and to be truthful, like the biggest hurdle in getting them written is starting writing. That's the biggest hurt. If I sit down and I actually start, like even if I'm a little rusty or I'm off that day, like my creativity is going to start flowing at some point, just because I'm going to start getting excited about an idea, or I'll just go down a rabbit hole, or I'll just get some grunt work done, honestly, that just needs to get done. But the biggest hurdle isn't like feeling creative, or it's just sitting down and starting. And I know that if I do that, I'm going to get some work done.
And it's sometimes for me, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, is I just know my first draft's probably not going to be great, or it's not going to work. But it's like, I got to get it out of me, though. Just got to get it out. And I did a lot of the designing of Grimworld on stream to keep myself honest, and so I could also talk to an audience, and I'd explain what I was working on, what I was designing, what problems I was trying to solve, and then just take them through the process of how I solve those problems as a designer. It's been a while since I've done that, but some of the feedback I got is people told me they had started designing again, just watching a designer design. They said, okay, this is enough. This is enough to get me going. I'm going to make my own thing now, which is kind of the magic of games.
It is. That's awesome. I was going to say that just shows me, it's just another reminder of how valuable all of that kind of stuff is in the scene. Because it just gets like, it's not, is this the right way to say it? It's not a zero-sum game. Like there's like, the more there is, the more there's going to be. The more creativity is being injected into the community, the more creative games we see get birthed out of it.
Yeah, and folks got to see the struggle too, and everyone's different, And whether I'm doing game design or I'm doing, at my day job, I'm the artist in residence for a global leadership firm. So I might do artwork, and I'm primarily known in video. And we did mention I'm a filmmaker,
right?
But I sit there and I work. I walk people through the design process. And then it's 2 hours, we finish, and there's this thing, and we made it, and we finished it. They see me look at it, and they see my face, and I just say, oh, I absolutely hate it. I absolutely hate this. It's bad. It's just not good. And we clip these things and we remind them. And that's the finished artwork that's out there in the world. And people go, I like that. And that's when we start to feel better. Like, I hated my book. I hated Grimworld when I wrote it. I hated when I got the PDF copy. I mean, you'll have Ethan on, and Ethan actually did a lot of the artwork for it. He also was one of the original play testers. But it wasn't until I held the print copy where I felt a deep satisfaction in just opening it, moving through the pages.
Yeah.
It was a monumental work, and I use material from that in almost every game that I run. And folks ask, well, where'd you get this? It's like, I designed it. And they're like, pretty cool, pretty cool.
I love that it all boils down to, in the end, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Which is probably, I imagine, a very satisfying sort of feeling to have someone react to something that you made in that way. So I want to ask you, like, sort of going back to the beginning, I'm really intrigued by this 11-year-old running for 17-year-olds. And I'm just curious how you ended up, how did you just end up in that scenario? Like, how did you end up running, getting exposed even to TTRPGs? Was it D&D, all that kind of stuff?
Nope, not Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
In fact, I had played maybe 3 Dungeons and Dragons sessions prior to 5th edition. I played a basic once. I played 2nd edition once. I played 3rd edition once. Each time it was tragic. But my first role-playing game was Star Wars: The Role-Playing Game by West End Games.
Yes, West End Games Star Wars. Yes.
It was my start, and I played it for about 30 years.
Wow.
I could always find a group, and it's the game I'd introduce people, because most people knew Star Wars. I'm like, we could be playing Star Wars in no time. And across the country, everywhere I could get a group going. But my brother had started playing Star Wars: The Role-Playing Game on his lunch in high school with his friends. Dice rolling was outlawed in high school, so they'd take the wooden pencils and they'd mark, they're 6-sided, and so they'd mark pips on them, and then they'd have an off-colored one for the wild die. And for my birthday that year, my brother got me a 3-pack of adventures. It was Riders of the Maelstrom, Black Ice, and then the 3rd book wasn't an adventure. It was actually Galaxy Guide 5 on Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
And then he had the source books, and then with the neighborhood kids, he's like, we're going to play Star Wars. This is the time. Prepare. And so I read the rule book, tried my best. There was one word that I didn't quite get, and then they scolded me for not knowing the rules well enough, told me to go home and read the section on combat 5 times. And I understood combat like the 2nd time through, and like, I got it. And then I'm sobbing, my older brother, so have you finished reading? I'm like, no, I'm only 3 times through, but I get it. This is how it works, right? He goes, yes, but you should have just lied and come back. I was like, I can't lie. And most people go, this is tragic. The thing is, I still work with this brother professionally in RPGs to this day. We are best pals. And he was a huge mentor to me in the industry. And I don't hold a gruff 17-year-old, Gen Xer too accountable to these days, but it always comes up. I've told this story at conventions too, with my brothers on the panel with me, where I'm like, But we got through the first session. Everyone just kind of stopped. Most of the group, it was their first time role playing. My older brother had played before. Everyone looked really satisfied, and they're like, can we do episode 2? Which I hadn't read, and I just improvised it and was just like, all right, we'll get in, we'll do it, and we'll just play. And because I realized once you kind of get the simple mechanics, there's something magical. Fast forward to this year, I won't say who, but there's a number of professional wrestlers that I run Dungeons and Dragons for on Thursday nights.
Okay.
And it was one of them, it was her first time playing, and we're like 90 minutes in, and she stops, she goes, they're making this all up. They're just winging it. What? We're throwing stuff and the game just keeps moving and they're just rolling with it. And they were just like, this is really cool. Because they were like, they thought like, they got to the point and they said, there's no way you had a script that could have planned for that shenanigan I was going to pull. I was like, nah, we just do this. And like, we're just playing games. And like, they're like, this is really kind of cool.
Yeah.
And like, it was her first time playing an RPG. And I always enjoyed that because it was the moment the RPGs as a concept clicked in her head. And she was like, this is good stuff.
I
a lot of fun.
I love that you could see the moment that it clicked for her, like what RPGs are as a concept, and like, oh, you're making that's such a great line. Oh, you're making this all up. Like, such a great...
It was a turn too. They're making it all up, and just kind of turned to their players. I was like, the game master doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah,
and nor can they foresee everything that's going to happen. But this was really fun to play. It's a unique. I call it a unique poetic space to be in as a game master.
It really is. Well, it reminds me of the Powered by the Apocalypse concept of play to find out, right? And I have just been so like that's been my mantra so much lately, GMing, and it coincidentally well, maybe it's not coincidentally, I'm running PBTA right now, and I'm doing a masked actual play, and like. This is not a spoiler, but it's almost. But like, we were recording some future episodes of the show, and one of the players says to me, "How badly do you want me to fuck your plans up?" And my answer to that, and this is one of my principles, this is one of my GMing principles, is like, "Oh, baby, fuck it all up. Like, do it. That's what I want. That's where the energy is. Like." You can't. That's the trick, right? Well, that's my trick, I think, is like, you can't fuck up my plans because because I play to find out. I don't have those kinds of plans. Like, I don't have some sort of story set in stone that's going to happen. I want to see what you're going to do, and then I'll react as best I can to that and try to work in your space. But it's that creative sort of back and forth tug.
Yeah. That's one reason I love it in Powered by the Apocalypse games, and as well as Invisible Sun. Invisible Sun is like, learn the setting, and then your players are going to follow their own ambitions. And then and there's been a few times too, like when I was playing on WebDM, like I'd message Jim Davis just privately, and this is her actual play, and we're doing it for a audience, and we want to make some entertainment. My style of running on stream has been described as "don't try this at home," where I'll use Dungeons and Dragons as an example, because a lot of my audience that watches this, they'll be very familiar. So
sure.
Characters are going to be fighting creatures that are maybe 3 rungs too high for them to reasonably be fighting, and I'm going to give them all the items that the advice columns say don't give to your players. So they hit a lot harder than they should, and they're fighting things more dangerous. But when they get hit, they might drop, but then they'll pop back up. And like, it's very swingy and wild, and no one really knows what's going to happen exactly. And it's one of those things where let's see how it happens, and let's see how it goes down. And some of the most dramatic and exciting moments have come out of that style of play. It's described as "don't try this at home," because that style of play is only sustainable for so many reps. And eventually the game loop will burn out, because you'll either cap out on magic or levels or creatures. You'll kind of lose what I'll describe as an orthogonal space. There's no place to move. You're at the end of the road, and there's no more place. And in chess, it's like a stalemate. If you move, you're going to put yourself in check. You can't put yourself in check. It would be considered illegal. So, we do that from an entertainment perspective, and also just to see what happens. And it's a wild space, and it also shows that there's all sorts of different kinds of ways to play. With Jim Davis, though, I message him and say, "Hey, I'm going to do something to wake the audience up. What are you going to do?" I was like, "I know we're not supposed to fight the demon prince right now, but I'm going to attempt to banish him. I'm going to hit him with my hammer and try to banish him." And he's like, "Do it. Try. You might die here." And I'm like, "I'm willing to. It's just everyone's asleep, and I want to wake them up. And if I lose my character, I did it. No one anticipated. No one even in the party knew." And so And I get it, like maybe I could communicate better. They're like, you might mess this for everyone else up. And the GM was like, no, I assure you, I'm only going to pick on one person in this scene, and it's that troublemaker who I admire for having the guts to do it.
Right.
So.
Oh, that's a really good way to handle it, right? That's the way, like I'm not going to punish the rest of the players for this, but I'm going to encourage the character to do it anyway. Because I admire the person for doing it, but I'm not going to hold everyone else accountable to those decisions.
Yeah, and the way it went down is it turned out to be a stalemate. The game master said, I forgot you had a lot of options in your bag of tricks, and I forgot how slippery and survivable you were. Well, that showed the party at the end of it. They're like, this was a stalemate. This was a draw. That was just one of us against the demon. Maybe we show up in a couple of weeks and we challenge this, we challenge him to a fight. And it's like, that's what happened. And it was a good experience, but also for the game master, I was like, listen, let's dance a little dance for a little while because we're also trying to do entertainment.
Right, of course. Yeah.
And with certain game systems, certain rule sets, like I really like Powered by the Apocalypse games or the Monty Cook games, which are centered around discovery, play to find out what happens. There's other game sets that do that as well. But like I let everyone know, with this flavor of Dungeons and Dragons, it comes down to the math, and it comes down to pretty well-defined abilities. You do this and this will happen, which isn't a bad style. It's like watching a basketball game at that point. And some people, they like watching a basketball game. I'm a sports fan, so it's like they get to see the skill of two people who really understand the rule set, have a whole suite of options, get into a little improv. It'd be like watching two professional basketball players drive by a street basketball court and say, someone got a ball, it's only half inflated, let's just shoot a little and just play around. So I'll end up making sports analogies all night, but there's a playfulness to it.
Yeah. Sometimes I've guessed. Yeah, it's amazing. It's interesting who in sort of the TTRPG space is either like does not like very not sports analogies, like they don't work, they don't get them, or they don't even like sports, or versus like people who do. But no, sports analogies work for me for sure.
Yeah.
But I am curious as to this idea of like playing for entertainment. Like, what are the ways you see the fact that there is all this play for entertainment happening now that like has just exploded to a degree that I personally did not predict. I did not see Critical Role coming. I did not see any sort of this degree that we're at coming personally. Obviously I was way off base. Yeah. How do you see that affecting sort of the space and design and home games and all that stuff?
Here's what I like. Different people are entertained by different things. And I tell people there's look at it at different tiers. There's theater, then there's community theater, and then there's sports. When we did RPG sports, which was really just competitive PvP combat heavy RPGs, huge audience, biggest numbers we had, thousands of viewers, and people were placing bets on who would end up winning. Very different audience than like say a traditional actual play audience. But there's space for both, and neither's right or wrong. They're just two different play styles that can be entertaining. So I think it's fun to try to find your audience and then find a way to connect with that audience. If I'm not quoting sports, I'm quoting pro wrestling and getting over with a crowd. Right. I played on a lot of different channels, and my goal is to always get over to the point where I've crafted various personas over the years. I'm wearing sunglasses now because my eye makeup's leaking, but I used to only wear dark, heavy shades on stream, and I was called the bad boy of RPGs. And like, I'd play it up, and I'd play the heel, and the other players would lean into it, and we'd get the audience to boo me, and we legit wanted them to boo because it was fun for them, and also they were in on the joke. Now, as sort of the paradigm shifts, people are more sensitive, and there's more of a blur between what's real and what's not. Pro wrestling analogy, it's a strong style. They don't know if I'm actually picking on someone. So take off the sunglasses, give a disclosure, start to play more lean more into what the current paradigm is. Some people will say there's no such thing as a persona. That's kind of baloney. I studied comedy under Steve Martin. Steve Martin was like, if you're going to be performing in front of an audience, develop a persona. And his advice was, he said, there's your best quality and your worst quality. You need to lean really hard into one. I always go for the worst quality, he said. He said, because it's more fun to, the jerk persona. It's like, play the jerk or, the loud and crazy guy, because it's just more fun and entertaining. However, you have to use caution when you're doing that, and you have to let people see behind the curtain from time to time, or evolve and switch things up. Can't necessarily we can't always do things the same way, because you have to be one, you have to understand the nuance of the audience. Two, you also have to understand that in order to remain relevant, you might need to evolve. I mean, for a while I was more of like a Mr. Rogers professorial type performer on streams, where we were really leaning into like my system mastery, my supportiveness of other players, kindness, generosity. These are all great things to demonstrate on a stream, particularly if you're playing with younger streamers. You can be more of a statesperson or a role model to them. We'll go back to sports the same way as Dr. J was for the 76ers. Right. Hey.
Philly, I got to drop that Philly reference. Yeah. I appreciate it. I really do.
He took Charles Barkley to buy his first suit. Right. So
yeah, exactly. And I don't consider it pandering when people on my show talk about Philly being great. It's just I love it. It's I can have it all day. No, it's interesting. Do you consider that stuff persona? Like, I mean, specifically like the stuff like very being generous and being kind, and
I think there's I apologize for interrupting.
No,
I think
please.
There's on-screen persona and off-screen person. The kindest feedback I ever got was someone tweeted out. They said the nice thing with working with Daisy is becoming friends with Daisy. Genuine friendships. I mean, there's cast members I've showed up to their wedding, or we've driven 1,200 miles to see each other and hang out.
Yeah.
Some of the truest friendships. And I think the kindness persona, people will smell. They'll smell a lack of authenticity, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want that. They want genuine kindness. That's why a lot of the streams I involve myself in might be crunchier, more instructional and tutorial. It's like, I want to teach you all how to play Cypher System.
Yeah.
So they get to see me as a person and as an instructor, as well as playing silly characters. I think I'd say Chris Perkins does a good job of this when he runs. I've met Chris a number of times, and just a sweetheart, very kind, and that comes out in his play. You can often see him rooting for the players, and I think though, and that's why I say with personas, I typically lean into the negative quality, because I wouldn't want to be a false representation of my good qualities. I'd want to be an authentic one. And also I would want to always demonstrate humility as well. I think it's very important to do that.
Wow. So it was all really good. It took me on a tangent, not a tangent, in a direction I just wanted to go explore down and see where it got us to. But I if you don't mind, I kind of want to circle back, because I've got some questions about, we talked about West End Game Star Wars, which, by the way, that was my second RPG, was West End Game Star Wars. And we're big fans at the All Ports Open Network. That's the first game. When we launched our actual play series, that's an anthology, and we rotate game to game, Apon plays. West End Game Star Wars was the first game we played in that series. But anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about.
That's very nice, though.
What other games were in that period of time for you? Were there other games in that era? Yeah.
I played many games growing up. I played Shadowrun 2nd Edition. I played MERP, Middle Earth Role Playing. I played Rollmaster. I played Toon by Steve Jackson Games. I played Seventh Sea.
Yeah.
I played Castle Falkenstein. I played Vampire the Masquerade. We did play for a little bit of third edition D&D, then decided we wanted to switch to Earth Dawn. I played Unknown Armies. I played Little Fears. I played a lot of games, and not everyone realizes that in the 90s, there was a huge RPG boom of all these indie games all over the place. And you had, if you read the books Designer and Dragons, you can talk about how there'll be anchor products like the D&D line. But if you're a publisher like Evil Hat or Pelgrane Press, you could get shelf space in the 90s and 2000s because the bookstores, before they went away for the most part, would be willing to gamble on a small publisher. So I played a lot of those games during the 90s and the early 2000s. I also played Call of Cthulhu in an ill-fated session. I always describe and Over the Edge. Gosh, that's another one. Yeah, we played so many games back then. My best friend Benjamin, growing up, would get all the games, and we would try them. Sometimes they would stick, sometimes they wouldn't. And I want to say Seventh Sea was probably the most beautiful book that we had seen. We never quite got the rules set totally down. In fact, that's typically what happened back then. We'd get a game, and then we'd be really excited, and then we'd play it 2 or 3 times and then be like, I got this gosh darn rule set. Let's switch up to another game. But we love them all, and that's why different editions come out. And yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's like a difference between people who mostly cut their teeth in that period of time, like coming up playing D&D, versus people who played all of these other RPGs. And you're right, people do forget how many games there were during that period of time.
The Marvel Superheroes game with the cards was really innovative.
Right.
And I feel there was a lot of people that were playing games by TSR. It was primarily D&D. There was a lot of people playing the White Wolf games.
Right.
And then you had the people that were playing everything else under the sun. I think Benjamin, who, one of my bestest pals, like the first time we played D&D, 5th edition, we were going to play, I forget the name of it, but the Magic World, I think, which I think is a BRP, a basic role-playing system. We were going to play Magic World. He was like, I don't think y'all are quite ready for this. I just grabbed the new starter set and let's do it. And then we started playing, and I'd played lots of games with Benjamin. The first time a rule dispute came up with D&D, though, he just said, no, this is just part of the game. He's like, I played D&D my whole life. He goes, we might have to talk it out, or we might have to try to find the best solution. He's like, we're not fighting, though. We're just talking about the rules. He goes, because D&D rules are sometimes very dense and hard and poorly written. Like, no offense to Chris or anyone else out there, Jeremy, but like he said, they're, they take some sorting out and some talking out, and then we'll come to a decision. And which totally demystified the game to me, because I was like, we don't have to get this right on the first try.
Right.
And but he let me know, like, culturally there was a difference. Like, talking about the rules is something that happens. Also, comic books like Knights at the Dinner Table kind of normalize discussing the rules at the table and making it okay to talk about it and playing to be clever. Shout out to Kenzer Co. and Hackmaster in those games.
Yeah, it's interesting, the idea that that's fascinating. I feel like probably different play groups, different regions too of play groups, clusters of play groups, probably like handle that kind of stuff differently from others, as far as like willingness to talk about rules, how you handle rule talk at the table.
Very different play groups. Like there's a good book, Playing at the World. I think John Peterson's the author, brilliant scholar. And he talks about the difference in the play groups of the coastal cities versus the Midwest at the advent of Dungeons and Dragons. He was like, and he actually pulls up the event reports where you can see rosters, and he pointed out that, the coastal cities were extremely diverse, and most of those people didn't come from war games. They came from the science fiction and fantasy community. They enjoyed doing LARPs and, reenactments, and, they just very different communities and a different approach. to the Midwest scene. And then they'd all have a chance to intermingle and meet each other at conventions, you know.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's stuff from like, your early gaming that you wish kind of was more prevalent nowadays in sort of the scene as it is today, whether that's in design or play or in entertainment?
I would say this, the things that I missed from the early gaming was probably the magic of introducing real life friends to games, because now it most of my gaming happens with people that I've met from the internet first. But growing up, we had a lot of immigrants in our neighborhood from Africa and Panama, and these kids learned a lot of English playing RPGs, playing Star Wars. One of my friends, Rodolfo, who's from Panama, we reconnected over Facebook last year, lives maybe 20 miles north of me now. He was, I think, an Olympic alternate in boxing.
Oh, wow.
Kids are Star Wars nerds, and he goes, my kids are shocked at how much Star Wars knowledge I have, because he grew up playing with us, right?
Yeah.
So like, and then he's like, oh, when he found out, he's just like, I have such good memories, my kids, he's like, they're into video games, they're into, the culture, and like, they're impressed that I can hang with them when we talk about, the details of Star Wars. He's just a dad now, former athlete, knows a thing or two.
But yeah, introducing real life people to games. For me now, that's sort of become introducing my longtime game friends to new games. Because I have friends who are super entrenched in wanting to play D&D. They just want to play D&D. I haven't had that feeling of I want to play D&D for as long as I can remember. Because there's so many games. There's so many amazing games and genres and stuff. I want to play it all. So now it's me trying to introduce new, convincing them to say, yeah, but we could try this. How does this game sound? Look at this genre. Look at this cool mechanic.
Give it a chance and see how it goes. And that's what I tell them. I'm let's just try this out and see how this goes. And maybe they like it, maybe they don't. But for me, I had played so many indie games like Dogs in the Vineyard and all these games and Sorcerer. I had never really played Dungeons and Dragons. So when I first played D&D, it was being introduced to a new game. But funny. Then after a while, I tell everyone it's such a skill-based game that it's sometimes I want to explore something else. I want to explore a different avenue. When I wrote Grimworld, it's not just a setting. We also released 8 different mechanical subsystems for writing letters to your family, or having relationship bonds, or doing investigations similar to Gumshoe, where we're inspired and we came up with our own systems for all these different play experiences. So we're you can integrate these with Dungeons and Dragons, but understand you're kind of switching the play mode. And then we had to tie it all back to D&D. But no, I'm with you where it's there's some really good games. I love introducing people to Good Society, or shout out to Story Brewers. Fighting Spirit playtest has come out, doing an anime sports RPG, which is just fascinating experiences, or playing Starcross with someone. These are great games.
Yes, well, StarCraft is one of my absolute favorite games. It might be my favorite RPG. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in that, but
it's good.
Such a fabulous experience, and such a different experience. But that's why Alex was my first guest on the show when I started it, and that was by design, very intentionally, that I wanted to get Alex as my first guest on the show. I'm so big, sort of bigger picture questions I wanted to ask you is would you say what is sort of the biggest takeaway for life, not but just for life, that you would say that you've gained from being in the tabletop community for as long as you have, all of your experiences in it? What has it given you or gifted you or taught you about life?
I think what has taught me the most about life is that sometimes it's more important to listen than to be heard. Because when you stop to listen, you might be introduced to a new perspective that you never heard before. You might be able to understand how someone's feeling in a situation. You might be creating space for someone that normally doesn't get space. and you might learn and be able to take something away that you can later share with someone else.
Wow.
So that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, would you say that? Do you think that playing tabletop role playing games? Do you think that they sort of teach that in like a unique or maybe more emphatic way than other things? I don't.
I think it creates opportunities to listen more so than other experiences in a participatory play experience. So
Right.
I'll give a quick game theory breakdown. There are sensory experiences. You see things, you hear things, you taste things, you touch things, you have five senses. There are story experiences where someone tells you about their sensory experience or someone else's. And then there's play experiences. They're games. It's a different emotional palette. It's a different method of communication than story experience and sensory experience. Now, these can become story experiences and sensory experiences. They're not limited to that, but the concept of a play experience. And I think it's just a unique space where it gets introduced, because in a play experience, like if I watch a movie, I can talk to the movie, but the movie can't necessarily talk back. If I play a game, I could talk and the other players could talk back to me. So I have my agency to either speak or to listen. As Vince Baker says, role playing is a conversation, which he updated in later essays. But it's learning when to speak and when to listen, and also who to listen to. So I think play experiences and RPGs, which are, conversations, you have all of these opportunities that you might not normally get.
When you also said something in there, you said something about the listening, people who don't necessarily find themselves usually in spaces where they're listened to. You said it more eloquently than I am now, but you said something about that. Do you want to say something more about that idea of like people who maybe aren't used to or are often in situations where they can be listened to, and what it means to create that space for them?
Yeah, you can give them a space where they can be brave. You can give them a space where they can be vulnerable. It's all rooted in psychological safety. Removing the idea of threats and more introducing the idea of rewards. These are all just psychological concepts. And you give them the space to really embrace play. And you have a chance to learn from them through this experience. And specifically, there's bonds formed at a table. Some of my best friends, we just started in games together, and now we can talk to each other about some of life's greatest challenges. And it's because we earned each other's trust through the act of play. We learned that we could trust each other. All trust is sort of rooted in this concept of overall broad concept of psychological safety. And so letting people know that they are free to speak and that you will listen and they will be heard. It's one thing to give them the opportunity to speak, but it's another thing to make sure that they are heard. Yeah. And even sometimes too, you might not always understand each other at first. You might be speaking two different languages, or you might have a different nuance or a set of definitions for things. But you'll notice some of the best friendships I have is we took the time to learn each other's languages and communicate at a higher level. Like, you're going to have Ethan on. Ethan and I have talked deeply about game concepts and design concepts for a long time, because we might agree with each other on 95% of everything. It's that 5% where we kind of disagree. It's the most interesting thing where we talk about, because we get closer and closer to figuring out, design problems or an approach to play in that sticky bit, which isn't the most comfortable place, but it's also, we have a trust with each other where we know we're free to explore that 5% where we might disagree. And hopefully we might even come to an agreement. Or at least always trust each other to bounce that 5% off.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to throw out there for folks, if they're in the chat and you want to throw questions in, feel free to throw questions in the chat. We are sort of in the last 10 minutes here, and that's when I usually open, like, just tell people if you have any burning questions, throw them in there. But my what's going on in my mind when you say all that is I have this experience on this show, basically every episode where the guest, like you just did, will describe something, and my thought process is like, man, like the other thing that I do that's not TTRPGs or gaming is religion, being a priest. And a lot of those things that we just talked about and that you described as like what TTRPGs can create a space for is like what I think religion should create a space for, and when it's at its best does, which is creating an environment for listening and where people can actually be genuinely heard, and creating the kinds of quality relationships that allow people to open up to one another and create authentic community and things like that. And we talk about this stuff in TTRPGs, and I'm like, yeah, so I really wish my church would do that better. Would be more like TTRPGs sometimes, but TTRPGs also fail at it, and we are kind of talking about it in an idealized way, right?
They can, and that's the thing. Yeah. We didn't go down. Sometimes I talk about when I teach people about design, we talk about maps of the mind, and it's all these different. It's a book that's illustrations of all these different psychological theories, and they explain the theory works until it doesn't. It's the same as with any social experience, or anytime we have two human beings liable, we are bound by the confines of our humanity, and we will fail. So there's been experiences in my life where religion has been extremely helpful, and there's also been times where it's been extremely hurtful. But it's the same with games. It's the same with employment. I've failed other people. And I think all things combined, the totality of the life and the human experience, it's that willingness to continue to try, a sincere effort. And I know some folks, they'll say, no, it's impact, not intent, or they'll throw all these lines out and they'll throw it out. I get that. It's not, failing sucks, and coming up short sucks, and real harm can be done. But the commitment to growth and improvement is kind of what life's all about. It's when I started training jiu-jitsu as a kid, I wasn't as good as I was when I stepped away from the sport. I lost a lot, and it was that willingness, and it kind of comes back to games. Games aren't always a safe space, and not everyone's a good listener. But I think as you mature in the hobby, you end up learning how to create space, learning how to manage a table. We just did a Fading Suns actual play, and I complimented the game master, Jim Davis from WebDM. Shout out, Jim. Because he and I both noticed at the same time, one player was not being given the spotlight or the space. And I was just like, oh, this is so sad. They're just sitting there. They're getting paid. But Jim very seamlessly, right as soon as I noticed it, moved the spotlight to that person and engaged them and opened it up. And the person felt good. And after the game, they're like, thank you for tagging me in. Like, it's our first time playing. I was a little nervous, but, I was just like, no, we're here to involve you.
I've seen people talk about how, like, the skills for running actual plays are not necessarily the same skills for, like, running at home games as a GM, and I can kind of see where people say that, but, like, every time I think about it, and I don't know what, it's just my own experiences, right? All the skills that I think are successful when running actual plays are actually skills I learned GMing with my friends for years, like the ones you just described. Noticing when someone's not getting attention or the ability to speak, or like those kinds of things that the GM has to be constantly thinking about, I think, if they want to do their job well.
Here's what I think the differences come. I think all skills are important, and I think learning how to apply skills to what I'll use the word system, but I'm referring to the system of facilitating a game, not necessarily a game system. So you learn these skills, and then I break it up into the 3 play spaces. There are private spaces, like home games, public spaces, you're playing at like an organized play, and then there's performative places. There's an external audience that is also watching. I think a lot of the skills, though, they're transferable from space to space to space. Hoist Gracie once said, it's better, this is a silly phrase, but I asked him a question online and this was his response. He said, it's better to know something than to not know something. So, right? But that's how he answered the question on his forum in like 1999. He just said, it's better to know it than to not know it. Because someone was like, what about this martial art? He goes, it's better you know that martial art than not know it. Come on. So you want to learn all these skills.
Yeah.
And I actually think actual play skills are very applicable to home games as well as organized play games.
Yeah.
The format might be different and the play space might be different, but skills are skills. They're useful.
Yeah, I totally agree. This might have been the fastest hour and a half episode of Holy Happy Hour Batman that for me that like I feel like I just blinked and it's 8:55 Eastern time where I am, and I just can't believe that happened. I want to give you the chance to plug stuff. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the 5-minute interview series, and we didn't get to it.
10 minute tabletop podcast.
That's what I meant. Sorry, my bad.
On my YouTube channel, and if you follow me on Twitter, you can find the 10-minute tabletop podcast. And I brought on people who play games from they're members of mariachi bands, and we talked about music and games. I brought in UX designers who are also voice actors who also design TTRPGs. We had Sean Reynolds from Monty Cook Games on, and we talked about how to get a career, a long career in games, and what it's like to have longevity. Ethan was on there, who will be on next week.
That's right.
Just a wide variety of people, and people say it's fun because as soon as it starts going, as soon as it gets juicy, my end credits music starts, and we got to wrap up with the final minute. It's a lot of fun.
That's cool.
So if you're watching this, you can probably find me online. I do stream. I'm currently just streaming random video games on Daisy Plays, on Twitch, sporadically, no set schedule. I'm facilitating Picaresque Roman, which is a Japanese tabletop role-playing game, translated by Lionwing Publishing. That will be broadcast on WebDM, twitch.tv/WebDM tomorrow night. But if you don't want to wait till then, if you click on their crowdfunding campaign, you can watch the full episode in the campaign. It's on YouTube. It's just unlisted. I play that with Little Cup of Joe, Flying Cirrus, Pruitt from WebDM, and the Noir Enigma, all excellent designers and role players. Outside of that, I produce a wide variety of actual plays here and there. I'm currently retired from playing. I said that I'm retired, yet I've showed up in about 6 different shows. Mostly while I'm currently working through my personal life. I'm stepping away from more public performances, but I'm still doing podcasts like this. I'm going to be on another show on Friday. Cool. I don't have the URL for it, but follow me on Twitter. I'll post the link. Sure. And that's going to be more talking about running games. Okay. So awesome. That's it for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being my guest this week. This was, like I said, this is definitely the fastest the time flew by for me. I feel like we could have gotten into there was too much to get into, too many avenues and so much meat to get into in the conversation. But thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Ben. I'm happy to come by anytime and play games with you sometimes. You're a wonderful
I love
host.
That. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Thank you for saying so. I'm going to ask Daisy to hang around in my little digital green room, aka our Zoom call. So I'm going to switch back over just to me. I'm going to do that real quick. And then I'm going to say goodbye to our Facebook and YouTube audience, which I'm going to stop streaming to so that our next show can get